The decision to grow or remain stagnant usually stems from the belief that there are only two potential outcomes, success or failure, both of which are unpredictable. The crossroads of success and failure is something we all arrive at in our lives. However, in music, this situation typically occurs for an artist early in their career once they've achieved significant success. But success is a double-edged sword. You see, achieving early musical success places you at the forefront of a wave that's been cultivated by your vision and creativity. It's yours as long as you maintain it. So it's important to make the right decisions because you never know how long you'll have the audience's attention, and you don't want to end up being the last one at the party looking around the place going, like, where the f is everyone at right now? Early success grants you access to the money, the power, and the respect. But soon afterwards, artists will reach a crossroads where they have to make the career-altering decision between prioritizing artistic integrity or becoming another corporate darling. You can either choose the route of artistic integrity, prioritizing creative innovation and artistic autonomy while embracing the challenges of growing with your audience, or you can choose the route of formulaic commercialization, a pathway that will grant you maximum commercial success, but at the cost of falling into a sunken place of predictability that only replaces your vision with the fear of instability, growth or repetition, artistic integrity or selling out. The most common definition of a sellout is as follows. A sellout is someone who caters to the desires of the masses, abandoning the direction that brought them their initial core audience in order to attain massive amounts of wealth and fame. These are the kind of artists who prefer to follow an established formula, creating safe and offensive bops, rather than taking creative risks that might alienate broader audiences. You can point to some artists like Taylor Swift, Drake, Lady Gaga, and The Weeknd as a few artists who are commonly accused of being sellouts.
I'll fucking drag you down, Rodeo, while your fucking ass just fucking stomp you. I'll fucking curb stomp you.
I'm sorry.
I'll fucking curb stomp you.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you were interpreting, but
Let me see
I wasn't
it.
doing anything.
Let me see it.
On a side note, I would like to say shout out to The Weeknd for releasing both Album of the Year and the Worst Movie of the Year in only a 4-month span of time in 2025. I mean, that's a different level of duality right there. I love him to death, but like, please stop acting, my nigga. This is not a good look.
Shut the fuck up! Shut the fuck up! Shut up! What are you doing? What the fuck are you doing?
Transcending your original sound and venturing into the pop world is more complex than it appears on the surface because becoming a pop figure isn't necessarily the same as selling out. You see, from one perspective, having a larger platform to amplify your message or the ability to afford bigger projects and secure big money endorsements can be too alluring for people to turn down, especially in an era where traditional superstardom has become scarce. And because this generation has been deprived of new superstars, being placed in that position can heighten your star perception even more. But is it fair to call someone a sellout for wanting a larger audience? I mean, after all, who doesn't want a larger audience?
I'm tired of being the underground emperor. I want to go mainstream and make money.
Are you serious? I don't know if you're
Yeah.
trolling me right now.
I'm tired of doing like the, man, it ain't about the money, the numbers. Try eat.
It's about the money this time. I like that.
Hey, no.
It's about the money and the numbers now.
It's about the dough.
If you believe in the power that your art can produce in the world, then why wouldn't you take that opportunity? This rush to judgment once you see your favorite artist diverging from their original messaging and sound is understandable when you consider some of the common drawbacks that can happen when an artist does cross over into the pop world. When an artist substitutes their original sound for one that's heavily pop, a significant drop in quality is usually not far behind. And when you're appealing to the masses, you have to generate material that is essentially one size fits all. That's why being called a pop star is inherently seen as an insult in genres outside of the pop bubble. You see, by creating something with such a broad appeal, intending to make it accessible to everyone, it's going to be so generic and non-specific that eventually nobody will find it useful in the long run and will naturally gravitate towards something that feels more tailor-made for them. Another piece of rationale for the anti-sellout crowd is having a deep disdain for artists who treat art like content. These are the artists who not only have found success, but have also maintained their success for an immense amount of time by adhering to a winning formula that usually involves a heavy amount of catering to the youth. This state of arrested development, combined with riding trends instead of dictating them, is how artists end up becoming the living embodiment of the iPhone, re-releasing the same year after year with one or two minor differences that will be marketed as artistic shifts in a new direction when it was something you've already done before and much better. At the end of the day, these critiques stem from the tension between how an artist decides to advance their career and the audience's interpretation of their intentions. What one group of fans views as selling out, others may view as an artist evolving. What does it mean to be a sellout and betray your art, or simply evolve in a way that the market understands, especially in today's musical climate? To get a better understanding of this nuanced back and forth, we have to take a closer look at the record labels and their role in this new streaming climate. Since the rise of social media, along with streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music, record labels, while still important, no longer hold the same level of commercial influence that they did in the previous era of physical media. Historically speaking, record labels were the main driving forces behind an artist selling out because they held the power to control how an artist's music was produced and marketed. They were also able to pressure musicians to conform to profitable trends, and more importantly, they had final say in what kind of material will be released to the public. So if the artist had a specific vision for the direction they wanted to take with their new album or their image, it didn't matter what it was if the record label didn't believe in its profitability. You see, music executives are notoriously obtuse when it comes to artistry, so much so that they had to implement A&R reps to find and develop the talent because executives are too focused on business and often lack a sense of creative vision. So whenever an artist was acting like a sellout, there was some understanding from the audience that the label had pushed them into compromising their creativity for a broader appeal and commercial gain. But ultimately, it didn't stop fans from still looking down on their decisions. It just made it easier to see the rationale. But nowadays, this power shift has had a complex effect on the idea of what it means to be a sellout. Today, artists have access to global audiences without needing the support of a major label like Universal or Sony. They just need a TikTok account and some Wi-Fi. And this removal of musical gatekeepers has gotten rid of the middleman that has been known to hold careers at a standstill if their material didn't fit certain standards, which now gives artists more control over their creative output. But much like a casino, the house always wins. Record labels don't have the same level of influence over who becomes a star or the reach that music can have now compared to back then, but that doesn't mean that they're not still dictating how artists and songwriters are being paid for the material that they create. Recently, UMG entered a new multi-year agreement with Spotify, the biggest music streaming platform operating today. And the most significant aspect of this agreement is that Spotify has agreed to pay a higher royalty rate to UMG for mechanical royalties, which is just one of a few aspects of their Spotify agreement that UMG has now pushed as a win for artists and songwriters. But the problem with this deal lies in the major issues that are still present in their relationship. Because for one, UMG streams still generate more revenue than their indie counterparts for the same number of streams. As an indie artist, your 1,000 streams will not generate the same amount of money that a UMG artist's 1,000 streams will, due to how they negotiate their rates directly with Spotify. This is because UMG can negotiate for a higher per stream payout rate with streaming services, whereas independent artists don't hold the same level of cachet that UMG does. And as a result, they typically receive a smaller fraction of the revenue. Moreover, UMG's relationship with Spotify isn't new, as UMG has had equity in Spotify for the last few years, collectively around 18%, which is now below 7% after they've cashed out their shares to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. Couple this with Billboard and Nielsen's arbitrary rule that 1,500 streams equals one album sale, which basically means that there are 1,500 ways that you, the producer, the songwriter, and the artist aren't getting paid properly. Because look, nobody needs to listen to an album 1,500 times for it to count as one sale. And to be honest, I don't even think anyone knows how they came up with this figure, but if I were a betting man, I'd say that they must have crunched the numbers and figured out that this 1,500 streams formula generates more money for themselves and keeps the artist broke and in check. Because the origins of streaming was an uncontrolled avenue that had the potential for artists to take the reins from the majors and other companies that worked hand in hand with them. This is what Jay-Z aimed to achieve with Tidal. As much as I've had my criticisms of Jay-Z over the years, I've always appreciated that he, at least on the surface, appears to be an advocate of artistic ownership. You see, Jay recognized the potential of streaming and wanted to establish a platform that was supposed to be artist-owned and artist-centered. Unfortunately, the platform didn't succeed in becoming a true competitor to Spotify and Apple Music, music due to various factors like high subscription costs, leadership issues, and entering the market later than their competitors. Their rollout attempts also didn't improve their level of consumer support. You see, instead of being seen as the revolutionary platform that it was heavily marketed as, their movement resembled platinum panhandling, just trying to get more money from the public because they weren't satisfied with what they got from Spotify. These obstacles ultimately prevented them from becoming the powerhouse that they initially envisioned themselves becoming, and eventually, the majors and the DSPs took control of streaming and proceeded to dictate the rules so that the lion's share of the profits would continue going to them. The reality of the music industry is that it's still a business, and it's one of the best examples of capitalism at its finest and at its worst. Under capitalism, music becomes a commodity, an entity that's valued essentially for its marketability and profitability rather than its artistic or cultural worth. Major record labels like Sony, Universal, and Warner control the rights to recordings, publishing, distribution channels, and marketing infrastructure. And due to their significant investment in these areas, they want to see a return on their investment. They want hits, not risks. They want to load the algorithms with songs that fit familiar molds. They want whatever material they invest in to be everywhere. So where's the relevancy in all this? And how does this play out with artists being sellouts? Let's look at Drake, the UMG darling for the last 15 years, up until he sued them for getting bopped upside his head by the 5-foot giant Kendrick Lamar Duckworth. He spent the last 10 years of his career bragging about having the highest numbers and conning the public into believing that music, but hip-hop specifically, should be judged primarily by the numbers. Because men lie, women lie, but numbers don't, right? That old bullshit saying. And I say bullshit because yes, numbers are what they are, but all stats and numbers need context to tell the full story. Drake's Scorpion album, for example, sold over 700,000 copies first week. But if we look at the full story, we'll see that 6 of his songs were responsible for 82% of the total streams towards that album. He basically went 6 for 25, which in most other scenarios would be seen as a album, and rightfully so. This phenomenon also speaks to another growing issue present in today's musical discourse. Everything is about numbers first, and if you have enough numbers, then your album will be hailed as a classic because everything is a classic to you stupid niggas, even though a classic is supposed to be representative of something being of the highest quality over a long period of time, not 2 days or not 2 weeks. Not 2 days, not 2 weeks. And if I'm going to continue being an asshole, which is on page 10 of the How to Be a Video Essayist Handbook, I don't think you can start calling any piece of music a classic until it's at least 10 years old. Hear me out real quick. Hear me out. Music is special in the sense that it's an art form that needs to be lived with and experienced for you to judge it accordingly. And I'm sorry to say this, but that can't be done adequately in 2 weeks. Can you have initial opinions on it? Of course. Can you say an album is good, great, or ass in less than 10 years? Obviously. And does all music need to be lived with for a long time for you to determine whether it's good or not? No. But a classic is the highest honor you can give any piece of art. And this rush to judgment in conjunction with this microwave mindset is an issue that plays a significant role in artists selling out. When Drake is rewarded with massive sales for following a playbook of mediocrity, it creates a trend that labels notice and will discuss in their corporate meetings and then subsequently push on to other artists. And this is where the death of album concepts, world building, and cohesiveness became a reality, and the rise of artists releasing these 30-song albums, which are essentially glorified playlists, became the industry standard. The goal that artists have with their albums today is just hoping that a handful of their songs dominate the algorithms and generate a significant return on investment. Artists have now been incentivized to push music out like a product, and it's in this decision to pump the albums up with unnecessary tracks, hoping that 1, 2, or even 6 of them can bring home the big money, that we have the modern day version of selling out. Artists aren't selling out to labels anymore, at least not directly. They're selling out to the platforms. They become algorithm slaves, and the labels have found another way to sustain themselves while continuously taking from the artists who create the product that the public is consuming. Only this time, they're using the algorithms powered by us to do it. And this is why formulaic songs have the significance that they do, because in this environment, many artists double down on a formula that works until it doesn't. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the artists who were not celebrated by the industry, but rather tolerated. These are the artists who aren't the corporate darlings, they're the agitators. For the individuals who didn't get into music to chase checks or popularity and wanted to have an outlet for creative expression, even at the expense of potential ostracism by the mainstream, you value the notion of artistic integrity. Artistic integrity is often used to represent a refusal to sell records or reject popularity just for the sake of doing so. However, artistic integrity is about an artist's dedication to their principles and making decisions that stay true to their creative vision and not allowing external pressure to dictate how they move. It means owning your voice, your lightness, and your words. It means having the ability to say no to easy success in favor of meaningful expression. And in the music industry where labels seek to maximize profits by any means necessary, this rejection can be seen as an act of defiance and one that can shelf your career. But it's this same kind of risky conviction that can garner you a strong fan base. And when it's done well, these artists can attain the same level of success, if not greater, than their commercial counterparts. Enter Prince and Frank Ocean. As a 20-something, I obviously didn't grow up listening to Prince's music, but I can't help but become more interested in his career over time, especially when I see how influential his music and attitude toward artistry have been for many artists I love today. In a roundabout way, before I ever listened to Purple Rain or 1999, I've already heard and loved what he represented. I just didn't realize that it came from him. Prince was an artist who made a career out of breaking all the rules of conventional tradition. He mastered the ability of blending different genres and actually making it sound good. Too many artists today want credit for venturing into genres outside of their norm and hide behind the idea of experimenting or peddle this false notion of being versatile just because they've explored multiple different styles of music. And the funny thing is that most of the time, these niggas just end up doing the most soulless and generic version of whichever genre they decide to torture with their mediocrity. See Drake's Honestly Nevermind, Lil Wayne's Rebirth, and Kid Cudi's classic, No, come on now, get the right one. Yeah, that one, there we go. As examples of what I'm talking about here. But that's probably the main difference as to why Prince was so good at mixing genres. Rock wasn't his norm, R&B wasn't his norm, and pop wasn't his norm. Music was his norm. And this is further evidenced by arguably his most impressive accomplishment, being able to play 27 fucking different instruments. Like he's different for that. On top of that, his songwriting had this unique ability to be sharp, deeply emotional, and somewhat arrogant in a way that felt refreshingly human and universal at the same time. But to me, his main draw had to be his ability as a performer. This is an area of artistry that I always see as the biggest indicator of someone's ability to be considered one of the ones for real. Because while art remains subjective through and through, an artist's ability to convey their messaging without the smoke and mirrors that can be created in the studio really shows the audience how connected you are to what you put your name behind. And in this category, Prince gets 10s across the board here, because throughout all his performances, you can really see how much of a master showman he was and how important the music he created was to him. To put it simply, Prince was so great because he could literally do everything and then some. There are very few artists who adopted Prince's level of approach to creative expression while also emphasizing the importance of artistic ownership and control. Because even though Prince was an artist, he was a fighter too. He was arguably the biggest voice for artistic ownership in the last 25 years, and rightfully so. Because like I said before, the music industry is pretty fucking evil. You see, Prince at the height of his career went to war with his record label, demanding the right to release music at his own pace and not whenever the label told him to. But what was even more important to him was owning his masters. Remember guys, this is the 90s, the era of peak physical media, and the record labels held all the power. So for an artist, even one as big as Prince, this was still a very risky move to make. And for some additional context, masters are a reference to the master recordings of music. Once a song has been recorded, edited, mixed, and mastered, it's now considered a master recording, and whoever owns the master recordings has ownership over how it's used. In a standard music contract, there's built-in language that would automatically allocate the ownership of these master recordings to the record label that you're signed to. The actual written lyrics will be copyrighted and are usually owned by the songwriter. But the songs that we hear on Spotify, YouTube, and the radio stations, if you still listen to the radio, will be owned by the record company. And the reason why ownership over these recordings is so significant is that whoever owns them can do whatever they want with them. They can license it to movies, commercials, remixes, whatever they want, and collect profits on it that, once again, will not go to the artist who created the song if they don't own their masters. I know I've said this once, twice, thrice, and a whole bunch of other times, but I will continue to say it. The music industry is one of the best examples of how cartoonishly evil capitalism is, because no matter where you turn, there's always another trap door waiting to fuck you with every move that you make.
No. Like Mariah Carey just had this big $20 million. That's like a huge deal, right?
So you feeling that?
No, well, what I mean, I don't understand. What the public sees the word $20 million an album. Well,
let's see. Do you all think that's a good deal?
What, I mean, tell me why. I mean, what am I missing?
Okay, let's do some math.
Okay.
If you
do math like that?
Yeah, kinda. If you sign me,
Okay.
you signed me to a record company,
Right.
or a record deal. Let's suppose you have a record company.
Right.
How much would you give me? The album sells for $18, right? $18.
Whatever, yeah.
All right. How much of that would you give me?
Well, I don't know how it works.
Well, no.
Half?
Half? Half sound good?
Yeah.
All right, check this out. If I sell 1 million copies, I'm going to have $10 million, right? Roughly $10 million.
Right.
If I sell 2 million copies, I got $20 million.
Right.
If I just sell 3 million copies, I got $30 million. Now who has the biggest record deal?
Oh, I see. Yeah, right. Okay.
Right?
Right.
So Mariah kind of got screwed.
And this was what Prince's fight with Warner Brothers was centered around: ownership over the art created by the artist. So when they refused to give him what he wanted, he started protesting loudly and proudly, which included changing his name to an unpronounceable symbol and referring to himself as the artist formerly known as Prince.
Wait, what was your name again?
Well, thank you for asking. My name is a pimp named Slickback.
Wait, a pimp?
Named Slickback, yes. Please say the whole thing if you would. Yes, that includes the a pimp named part. Yes, Tom, every time.
And in his most notable form of protest, he had even started performing with the word slave on his face. You see, Prince couldn't stand the idea that a small collection of music executives who've never written a single lyric in their lives tell him that we own everything you do and create, even your f***ing name. We own that too. To the uneducated, this was just another attention-grabbing publicity stunt made by an artist who's just acting like a diva. But it wasn't. It was a fight against the industry for what was inherently his. Because Prince understood something vital about artistic integrity. If you don't own your art, someone else owns your message. However, after decades of fighting Warner Brothers, his determination would finally pay off as they gave Prince ownership over his masters in 2014, reclaiming the rights to what he put his heart and soul into, showcasing what happens when a strong spirit transcends rules. Prince's battle with Warner Brothers taught the next generation how to be more intentional with their art, and not just from a creative standpoint, but from a business one as well. And this is where Frank Ocean comes in. Where Prince's method of gaining ownership over his creations involved direct confrontation over a long period of time, Frank's approach was subtle yet intentional, with maybe a revenge factor potentially working as another source of inspiration. Frank Ocean's journey to superstardom was an interesting path because if the industry had their way, he would have been relegated to being the greatest ghostwriter of all time. Frank's music career began as an industry songwriter under the name Lonnie Bro, but he always had bigger dreams of releasing music for himself. So in 2009, he signed with Def Jam Records with the belief that his career would finally progress in the direction that he had always hoped. But instead of getting proper attention and artistic development from them, he was overlooked and shelved in favor of bigger artists. And once it was clear to Frank that the label would be of no help, it was time to take matters into his own hands, a mentality that he adopted from being around Tyler the Creator and the entire Odd Future collective.
Has Odd Future impacted my career? Absolutely. They've liberated my thinking in some ways, creatively, and in a sense of knowing that you can do a lot of it by yourself
Linking up with Odd Future would probably be the most important thing he ever did for his career, as he was now around like-minded people who all held unique perspectives in life and were now united through a desire to share their unorthodox creations, cultivating a space for people who weren't conventional but still felt like they had something important to offer the world. That unorthodox do-it-yourself mentality ultimately became the driving force behind Frank's debut project, Nostalgia Ultra. The mixtape had become an internet sensation, with fans and critics praising the project for its ability to utilize elements of R&B, pop, and alternative, and package it in a cohesive manner that gave us early insight into the personality of the artist who we would come to know as Frank Ocean. The funniest thing I learned about Nostalgia Ultra over the years, it has to be the fact that Def Jam was rushing to sign Frank Ocean while not realizing that he was already signed to their label as Lonnie Bro. And look, I understand that in his GQ interview he wrote this off by just kind of asking them for $1 million for the next album, but I have a feeling that this was unofficially strike two. But the success of Nostalgia Ultra wasn't just a lesson in artistry, it would be his main takeaway for how he would run his career in the future, prioritizing art and doubling down on the do-it-yourself mentality, but to a whole nother level. But most importantly, learning how to trust his own vision. This would result in him working with Beyonce, Jay-Z, and Kanye West, all at the height of their careers. And I think it's super crazy in hindsight that the first voice you ever hear on Watch the Throne is Frank Ocean's voice. An artist who at that point doesn't even have an album, a radio single, or any sort of notoriety outside of the internet in a world where the internet hadn't fully taken over yet. So he was still technically a nobody to the mainstream. So for the two biggest rappers of all time to have him be the opener to their collab project says a lot. And now that Frank had the platform and the big money support from his label, he would carry this momentum into the release of his official debut studio album, Chanel Orange. I've always credited The Weeknd and Frank as the two people who drastically changed the direction of R&B, an effect that we're still feeling to this day. The Weeknd opened the door for darker perspectives and aesthetics, and Frank allowed R&B to embrace queerness. Now look, has queerness always existed in R&B? Yes, but it was always more of a if you know kind of innuendo, and a big part of that is due to R&B still carrying the burden of exhibiting proper masculinity. R&B artists were allowed to be more vulnerable than their hip-hop counterparts without being chastised for it, because the music still reinforced the ideas of pursuing women and sexual desires centered around women. And to be blunt, there was no room for men to be lusting after other men in R&B for a very long time. I also believe that the church and its religious influence played a bigger part in this than most would realize. You see, the church existed as a training ground of sorts for many R&B legends, as they were able to use the church to develop their vocal skills and stage presence in church choirs and gospel ensembles. Usher, Whitney Houston, Marvin Gaye, Diana Ross, Tevin Campbell, Jodeci, and countless others came from a significant church background. So even though most of these artists would transition into making secular music, I don't think certain teachings ever left the mind of those individuals and the audience. And then of course, there's the long-standing rumor that I believe has been confirmed by Patti LaBelle at this point, that even Luther Vandross suffered in silence for decades out of fear of facing public backlash for being gay. This is why Frank's 2012 Tumblr letter was so significant. In a risky move, literally a week before his debut album, he told the world that his first love was a man. This set the stage for not only the album, but for queerness to become more accepted in a space that has historically been against anything on that spectrum. And while the world isn't completely kumbaya when it comes to anything outside of heterosexuality, we have come a long way from where we used to be. And for being able to express such a level of vulnerability, Frank received emotional support from the internet. Shocking, I know, right? A universally acclaimed classic and even a Grammy for the album. Not bad for a guy whose label didn't even know he made music for real. But before you believe that this is where things end on a perfect note, just remember my opening statements that all artists reach the crossroads between integrity and selling out once they attain success in the early part of their career. And the moment Frank won this Grammy, he officially reached those crossroads. In the 4 years after Chanel Orange, Frank's decision would become abundantly clear to everyone, and the music industry would never be the same again. Frank had one more album that he owed Def Jam, along with a $2 million advance that he spent making his album, traveling the world, and other things that talented introverts like to do. You know, bike riding around New York City and whatnot, right? And Def Jam was expecting him to give them an album, and he did. In 2016, Frank released the visual album Endless, his last album with Def Jam Records. a project where Frank is seen building a staircase with the album playing in the background. And I'll be honest with you, I was very confused. I didn't know what to make of this album myself when it first came out. I just kind of figured there was something more to what I was looking at that I couldn't understand. But my lack of understanding was rooted in not understanding the album from a creative standpoint. Neither I nor anyone else could have foreseen what this album truly represented: freedom. Because the next day would be the beginning of the Blonde era. With the release of Endless, Frank was not only free from his contract, he gained his masters back and calculatedly orchestrated the release of Blonde under his own label and secretly negotiated a $20 million deal with Apple to have the album be an Apple Music exclusive, and all the profits went back to him. What Blonde artistically represented was a more mature and bittersweet perspective that contrasted Chanel Orange's more naive and warmer point of view, while furthering his creative need to push boundaries, creating an album that successfully continued the legacy that Prince had left, a genreless, forward-thinking project in which the fruits of the labor went to the laborer and not the machine. With this move, Frank didn't just walk away with his freedom. Like Prince before him, he showed us the power in holding integrity above all else and the benefits that come from knowing your worth. By observing figures who choose the commercial route, it's easy to see why they did so. The promises of fame, money, and acclaim, courtesy of the machine, are enticing. But this industry loves no one, and if you choose to play the game by their rules, you'll eventually be discarded without a second thought the moment you're no longer of service. To artists like Frank and Prince, they understood that it's better to be an underground king than a powerful court jester, because a court jester's power exists only as long as they continue to please their king.